Hello everyone, welcome back. This is Microeconomics. So, we are basically moving from the previous discussions on welfare and price control policy to this new topic today. Yes, so we are going to talk about elasticity. So in this chapter, we are going to talk about the elasticity of demand and what are the determinants of elasticity of demand and how elasticity of demand relates to the revenue of the firm. By the end of the sessions, we are also going to discuss about other elasticity concepts. So what is elasticity? So elasticity basically is a general concept that provides a technique for estimating the response of one variable to change in another. So in many cases, in the study of economics, we are trying to figure out the changes of one variable, how it will affect the other ones. For instance, in the study of demand, we're always asking the questions. When the price changed by this much, and how is that going to change the quantity demanded for the goods? But the problem is, if we are going to keep the measure in dollar or quantity of the goods, it makes it difficult to compare across different products. Let me give you an example here. So let's say we have the product listed out in the table, economic textbook and Toyota Prius. So I have the two products change in price for the same amount, which is $10. So the economic textbook changed from $100 to $90. The Toyota Prius also discounted by $10, which is from $30,000 to $29,990. Well, as you can see, when you, as a customer in the market, trying to purchase these two products, the $10 discount on the economic textbook might be a little bit more appealing to you as comparing to the $10 discount on the Toyota Prius. And the reason is because when we are trying to measure or when we are trying to think about the change, we most of the time do not care much about the actual change in values. Most of the time, we care about the percentage change. And here, when the economic textbooks change by $10 from 100 to 90, it's actually 10% decrease in prices. And when the price of the Prius changed by $10 from $30,000 to $29,990, it's only account for 0.03% change or decrease in price. So in order to capture the responsiveness of these changes, it makes it more difficult for us to study the change in prices or maybe a change in quantity. We have to find some measurement that give us a little bit more standardized measures of these changes. And therefore, in this case, we think the percentage change in price might be a better measure. So generally speaking, the price elasticity of demand actually measure the percentage change in price and the percentage change in quantity of the goods. So when we are trying to study the percentage change of the two, we will be able to standardize our measures. And that standardization actually help us to keep a very close eyes on the responsiveness of the change in price to the change in quantity demands in the market. So now we are going to study the marginal relationships in terms of percentage change in price and quantity demanded for the goods, instead of price and the quantity. Well, the calculations for the price elasticity of demand, it's actually not that complicated, but it will involve a two-part calculations. So the general idea for calculating the price elasticity of demand, it's basically using the percentage change in quantity demanded for the goods divided by the percentage change in price. I have the notations using in the mathematical format, and I have a list of these notations explained in the slides. Well, when we talk about the percentage change in quantity demanded and the percentage change in price, then you have to adapt to this percentage change equations. So this is an easy way to calculate the percentage change in equations. And in the later future videos, I'm going to give you an idea how to use the different rules or different calculations to calculate the percentage change of quantity demands and the price. So here we are using the basic calculations of percentage change. So we use the new quantity minus the base quantity and divided by the base quantity and multiply by 100%. And for the price, we can calculate the percentage change in price using the new price minus the original price and divided by the original price and multiply by 100%. So given an example here, we have, let's say, the price change from $10 to $11. So $11 is the new price and $10 is the original price. I can actually calculate this very quickly on a piece of paper, and I do strongly recommend you guys to actually pause the video and give it a try to plug in the number into the equation and see if you find the answers. For the quantity demand change, we have the quantity change from 500 units to 400 units. So 400 unit is the new quantity and 500 unit is the original quantity. Again, you can plug in the number into the equation and see if you find the answer. So the answer you get should be the following. So the percentage change in price is 10% positive, and the percentage change in quantity is a negative 20% because it decreases. So once you have the percentage change calculated from that two equations, you can now combine the two answers. So in the study of price elasticity of demand, most of the time, the textbook will give you a positive number. Well, indeed, this is kind of like a confusion for most students, because in the previous calculations, we found that the quantity demand actually changed by negative 20%. But what I'm presenting to you in this calculations is a positive 20%. So the problem is, when we are trying to study the demand, we know the law of demand actually help us to understand the behavior of the buyers, and they always follow the law of demand. When the price increase, people will buy less, and when the price decrease, people will buy more. And therefore, we know the two variables will always have this negative relationships. Well, many economists actually assume people actually study the law of demand very well before hitting this elasticity chapter. And therefore, they usually will just skip the negative signs in our calculations because we know the elasticity of demand will always be a negative number. So for the convenience, we basically take out the negative sign in these calculations, and we put the quantity demand percentage change 20% into our calculations and divide it by the percentage change in price, which is 10%. And after the calculations, we get the final value here equals to 2. So that means, well, the quantity demand for this particular goods is 2. Well, this coefficient is actually a very powerful and useful number so that we can talk about the marginal change of the responsiveness of the demand. So the simple definitions here is, for every 1% change in price, the quantity demand will change by 2%. And for a more accurate or more detailed explanations, because of the law of demand, when the price of the products increase by 1%, the quantity demand will decrease by 2%. Ceteris paribus. So remember, this coefficients actually give us a really clear marginal definitions here. So every time when we interpret this number, we always say for every 1% change in price, and then whatever the percentage change in quantity demand, which is the number reported by the elasticity of demand calculations. If we get the elasticity of demand equals to 5, that means for every 1% change in price, well, the quantity demand will change by 5%. So keep in mind, there are many students actually fall into this trap. Many students actually thought that the elasticity of demand is actually the slope of the demand curve. But instead, well, the price elasticity of demand, it's only very similar in terms of the calculations, but they are not actually the slope of the demand curve. So when we're trying to calculate the slope of the demand curve, we use the change in price divided by the change in quantity demand. But when we're trying to calculate the price elasticity of demand, we actually use the percentage change in quantity demand divided by the percentage change in price. Even though they look very similar, but again, let me remind you one more time, they are different calculations. So once we get the elasticity of demand defined by a number, we can then define the types of products using the value of the number. So we basically define the elasticity of demand in 3 different categories. Whether they are elastic, inelastic, or unit elastic. So what does it mean? Well, let's give some example here. When a demand is elastic, which basically means when the price changes by a little bit, people will actually be very responsive to change the quantity demands of the goods in the market. So for instance, when you see something actually get discounted by only maybe 1 or 2%, and then you are very excited to go out and immediately buy that product. And in that case, that demonstrates an elastic demand. You are very responsive to any change of the price of that particular goods. On the other hand, when the price actually change a lot, but the quantity demands in the market actually change just by a little. And that's what we call an inelastic demand. And that happens when the percentage change in price is greater than the percentage change in quantity demands in the market. And finally, we have this unit elastic demand. And this is basically a special case. This is a case where the percentage change in price, let's say by 10%, and the people in the market actually responds by purchasing the quantity demands of the goods changed by the exact same percentage point. Right? So 10% increase in price, 10% drops in quantity demand. Well, there are 2 exceptional cases that we actually study in this chapter, and those 2 cases are basically the case where we are trying to put a stop in this study. So we know that the price elasticity of demand can range from any number from negative infinity to positive infinity. But the problem is, can it hit the infinity? And obviously, the question is no. So when we talk about the price elasticity of demand goes to the positive infinity, it basically means, well, the product is perfectly elastic. So that means, well, the demand for the product is actually very super sensitive to the change of prices. Or in the extreme, when the infinity sign is given, that means, well, consumer only accept one particular price. Any price that is higher or lower than that price will not be purchased in the market. And the other extreme, and again, well, I'm sorry for my earlier misinterpretations. Elasticity of demand can only be ranged from 0 to negative infinity, right? Or maybe if we are ignoring the negative sign, then we can go to infinity, positive infinity, right? So the perfectly inelastic demand is when the elasticity of demand equals to 0. So what does it mean when the elasticity of demand equals to 0? That basically means, well, people do not care about the price of the product at all. The price of the product is $1, people buy it. They will buy 5 units. When the price of the product actually go up to $10, they still buy 5 units. Go up to $1,000, still 5 units. $1 million, still 5 units. And that's basically demonstrate the perfectly inelastic demand. Well, as you can imagine, because of the law of demand is always true, there is never a case that you will find a perfectly elastic demand and a perfectly inelastic demand in the market. Again, those are the two values that we are just trying to put the end of the study for this elasticity of demand. So the elasticity of demand will always be range from 0 to infinity in this case. It will never hit 0 and it will never hit infinity. When we're looking at the graph of the demand curve, somehow we can also kind of like getting an idea about, well, whether the demand is elastic or inelastic. Again, in a general case, when you see a demand curve like the first graph in graph number A, you see the demand curve that it's relatively flat, right? The slope is not very big. Well, this is usually indicating the demand curve is a elastic one, because you can see, well, there is a little change in price that causing a big change in quantity demands. On the other hand, if you look at graph number B, you will see a very steep sloping demand curve. And this is the kind of demand curve that we usually will consider to be an inelastic one, because again, you can see a big change in price only causing a small change in quantity demand. A unit elastic demand usually will not be a straight line. So the reason is because in a straight line format, the elasticity of demand will change at every single point. So the only case where you will find the unit elastic demand is when the demand curve is actually concave towards the origins of 0 in the graph. And also go to the extreme, in graph D, you will see the perfectly elastic demand where the demand curve it's basically a horizontal line that pointing at one price. And the other extreme, graph E, you will see the perfectly inelastic demand where the demand curve is a vertical line that pointing at a specific quantity. So this is basically the fundamental way how we read the graph and trying to make sense of the elasticity concept. So what are the determinants of elasticity of demand? How come sometimes the product can be more elastic in certain market but less elastic in different markets? Or maybe you can ask yourself the questions, how come I buy the goods in the market? Sometimes I think the good is more elastic and sometimes it's less elastic. So the four fundamental components that actually causing the price elasticity of demand of the goods. Number one, substitutability. Whether you can easily find substitute products in the market or not. When the product can be easily replaced by another substitute in the market, usually people will be more consider the price of the product, because they know if they are going to buy the two things, well, they are exactly the same, they will be very, very carefully evaluating the price, and therefore they will become very sensitive to the change of prices in the market. So the more substitute it is, the more elastic the product will be. And the reverse also true. The less substitutes that you will find in the market, the more inelastic you will be. For example, like medications. And number two, depends on the proportions of income spent on the product. So when you're buying something that actually spend a majority of your incomes to purchase, and obviously you will be a little bit more careful to buy that product as comparing to if you're only spending, let's say, $1 on buying a pack of gum. Well, whether the pack of gum has a discount of 50% or maybe 90%, well, you're probably not going to make much dramatic difference purchasing the gum today. So therefore, when you're buying something that takes up a lot of your incomes in a decisions, you will be more price sensitive. So that means you will be more price elastic. But when you're purchasing a good that it's not taking a big portions of your income, then you will be more inelastic to purchase. Number three, depends on whether you are buying a necessity goods or luxury goods. So when you're buying a necessity goods like tissue paper, rice, cereals, instant noodles, or maybe I don't know, well, kitchen paper, right? So those are the things that you will have to buy anyway, right? So it's not like, oh, okay, well, I ran out of tissue paper at home, but the tissue paper is not on discount today, so I'm not going to buy it, right? So you will still have to buy it regardless. So therefore, when people purchasing a necessity goods, they are usually be more inelastic. They don't have the flexibility to make choices, right? When they need it, they have to buy it. However, luxury goods define to be the types of goods that you don't actually need essentially in your life, right? It's just additional, right? So when you have income, then you can purchase more. Luxury good is not something that not something that is necessary in your life, and therefore you will be more flexible to choose when to buy it and how you're going to buy it, and therefore you will be more price sensitive and more elastic. And last, time periods also make a big difference. So it depends on how much time you have to make a purchasing decisions in your life. Let me give you an example. If you're walking in a desert and you know you're almost dying because you run out of water walking in the desert, and you see someone actually selling the water and telling you, hey, you know what? If you don't drink this bottle of water in 5 minutes, you are going to die. Well, in those cases, of course, when you only given 5 minutes to make decisions in your life, whether to live or die, then you will be super inelastic, because you don't given a time to think how to purchase the product, right? So the product is $100, you buy it. $200, you still buy it, right? So you'll be very super inelastic. However, if you think about gasoline price, right? So let's say gasoline price actually go up by another 50 cents. Well, your car is still running, right? And it has a full tank. Well, do you have to buy it today, or do you want to wait a little bit more to see when the prices actually drops? Of course, when you are actually having a good full tank of gas in your car, you are not in rush to purchase the product yet, right? You can actually wait to see if you can get some price adjustments in the market so that you can take advantage of that. So time periods make a significant difference when you are making your decisions on purchasing the goods in the market. The less time you have, the more inelastic you will be. And the more time you have to make your decisions, the more elastic it will be. So in your next class, we are going to start talking about how price elasticity of demand actually relate to the firm revenues, and how firms sometimes trying to use different pricing strategy to maximize their revenues when they figure out the demand of the market. So I'm looking forward to see you guys next time. Hope you enjoy this video. Goodbye.